This course is presented to you free of charge by TTJ Tech Services of www.ttjtech.biz and by Stir It Up of www.stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U, not an I, so that's STURITUP.com. TTJ Tech Services and Stir It Up are pleased to offer this course to you, to the glory of God, and to the benefit of all those who listen. Welcome to the TTJ Midwinter Digital Cafe on Apple TV, coming to you from TTJ Tech Services at ttjtech.biz. This is session 1 on the Apple TV. Now, what we want to do today in our first session is we want to cover some of the basics. We want to cover the fundamentals. I talk about this every time we have a class. And not only when we have a class, I teach this to my kids in different things that they're interested in. When my son wanted to start to learn to play the piano or these kinds of things, we had the same talk. When I preach, I'm a preacher. And when I talk to people in church about this, when learning to walk by faith and so on. And that is the fundamentals. And I heard it said this way one time. And some of you have heard this story, but some of you haven't. I heard it said this way: what are you watching when you watch the Super Bowl? Or you could take out Super Bowl and you could put in any other sporting event or singing competition or anything that you're interested in, right? But we got the Super Bowl coming up in a little under a month now. We're watching closely. If we follow football, I personally am not a sports person, but I do enjoy the Super Bowl. It's a nice excuse to make a whole bunch of different foods at a time, as if I needed an excuse. We just kind of like to do that, and we get together with family and friends and we watch the Super Bowl. But what are we watching? What we're watching is we are watching masters of the fundamentals. That is, people who have become so good at, so trained in their craft, their profession, their sport, their art, whatever it is, that everything else just sort of fits into place. And so when we teach, we try to teach the fundamentals first. And we believe if you learn those fundamentals, you can do anything. Now, with the Apple TV, there's far less to learn than when you're learning an iPhone or an iPad or something like that. There's just far fewer things you need to know. So it's going to be a lot quicker. And that's why we have only 4 sessions. The other thing to point out is that when you are learning the Apple TV, it is very likely that you already use something like an iPhone or an iPad. So that's going to make it even easier if you think on those terms. If you think about the transfer of gestures and concepts and so on from an iPhone, say, to an Apple TV, for instance, it's going to make a lot more sense. Now, of course, we are voiceover users, so we're going to be talking about this from a voiceover perspective primarily, but we have plenty to offer if you're not a voiceover user as well, and especially on the Apple TV. There just aren't that many differences that you need to be aware of. There are a few, but there just aren't that many, so it's going to be pretty simple. Now, what we do have to talk about over the next week and the next 4 sessions, all these 4 sessions here, are some other aspects of TV. We need to talk about things like, for example, how do I get the content that I want to watch on my Apple TV? Can I use the Apple TV as a full-time replacement for another kind of, set-top box, maybe a cable box or a satellite receiver? And speaking of cable or satellite, do I need to be, or should I become, a cord cutter to really benefit from the Apple TV? So we have to talk about that. Now, we also have to talk about sort of what if I have certain content that I really, really want to watch. How do I make sure that I get it? And if it's not available in my area, are there other options? These kinds of things. So all of this and more, these are all things that we're going to cover. Plus, we're going to cover the many things that the Apple TV can do besides just being used for movies and TV. Those are going to be the primary areas of focus, certainly. But we're also going to talk about the other things that the Apple TV can do because there's a lot. And we're going to talk about one of Trainer Cliff's favorite topics. And well, he's like me. He likes the Apple TV just overall. It's one of our favorite devices that Apple makes, and we like all the Apple devices. But one of the things we're going to sort of let Trainer Cliff talk about next week is using the Apple TV for your home movies, for things that you didn't purchase online or stream or what have you. And, you have old digital files or DVDs or something? And is there anything that can be done with these to make them work with the Apple TV? We're going to talk about using the Apple TV with antennas, and we're going to have a good time here. So grab the popcorn and let's get started. Now, today, it's the basics, and we have a couple of areas that we're going to do. The first area we're going to cover today is about physically connecting and then setting up your Apple TV. And of course, going along with that, it is necessary for us to learn the remote layout. We've got to learn the remote right away. Now, once we do that, we're going to switch gears a little bit for the second half of today's session. We're going to come back to the Apple TV hardware on Wednesday and learn the voiceover gestures and commands and all of those things. We will do that. But today we're going to switch gears for the second half. And we're going to talk about where we get our content and that cord cutter question and all of that, because while we'll revisit that more in depth next week, perhaps, we need to talk about it right away so that we can hit the ground running. Because if you get an Apple TV and you don't have any idea how or where you're going to get your content, then you're not going to experience the best that the Apple TV has to offer. I have set up Apple TVs for clients who aren't sure yet where they want to get their content, and they're not ready to subscribe for a lot of streaming services or, make any drastic changes or anything. And the problem becomes, we can do that, right? I can give them some free apps to try, things like YouTube and Pluto and Tubi. And certainly there's enough there to get started. And maybe they have a package through a cable company or a satellite provider. So then we can use other apps that I'll explain about later on today. But again, the problem becomes they don't get the full experience if they don't know where the content's coming from and how they're going to get it. So we're going to switch gears about halfway through today and talk about that, and then come back on Wednesday to the hardware. All right, so let's first of all describe what is the Apple TV, just in case there's anybody here who doesn't know. Maybe there's still somebody here who thinks the Apple TV is actually a television, and the fact is it's not. When they say Apple TV, that's just the name of it. It is not an Apple television. It's a little set-top box. It's not unlike any other set-top box that you might have, except it is rather smaller than some set-top boxes. It's just a little square, kind of fits pretty much in the palm of your hand, and very, very light. And the top of it has a smooth, sort of shiny, kind of glossy feel with the Apple logo. And the back of it is going to have a couple of ports. Now, at the very least, you're going to have a power port where you plug in your power cable in the back. But you may also have an Ethernet port. So there are two models of Apple TV if you're still thinking about purchasing one or getting additional ones. There's the Apple TV Wi-Fi and the Apple TV Wi-Fi plus Ethernet. As its name suggests, the Wi-Fi one does not have an Ethernet port. And I will say that for most people, you probably will not need the Ethernet port. There's always a debate in the industry, and there are some people who say, oh, no, you should always hardwire. But I don't do that. Our family doesn't do that. To my knowledge, Trainer Cliff's family doesn't do that. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that he, like me, has more than one Apple TV for their family. So certainly the ones that are not close to the router, you're not really going to most of the time have that option of hardwiring anyway. And you're going to be just fine with Wi-Fi. If you have a good Wi-Fi system, now that's something we'll talk about in a couple minutes because that is important. I don't want to diminish that. But as long as you do, we'll come back to that, you will not really need to hardwire. But the option is there if you buy the Wi-Fi plus Ethernet model. So you say, I don't intend to hardwire, Matt. Is there any other reason for me to get the Wi-Fi plus Ethernet model? Well, actually, there are a couple of reasons. So the Wi-Fi plus Ethernet model has double the amount of storage, twice the storage, internal storage, as the Wi-Fi only model. Now that may or may not be important to you. Let's discuss that. So the Wi-Fi only model has 64 gigabytes of internal flash storage, SSD, basically. I guess it's probably not entirely inaccurate. Okay, and the Wi-Fi plus Ethernet model comes with 128 gigabytes of storage. Now, will you need 128 gigabytes? Well, it's hard to answer that question. The general answer for most people is probably no, because you don't have to store anything on the Apple TV except the apps themselves. So, like if you're watching a movie or a show, even if you buy that movie or show, we'll talk about how to do that. It's not going to be stored locally. It's going to be stored in the cloud and then basically streamed, buffered to your device. So it's not like you need to have gigabytes of storage available for your movies and shows. Most of what you'll be doing is streaming. But if you are someone who likes to play games on their Apple TV, especially maybe you are sighted or you've got sighted family and they like some of the really graphics intensive games and so on, those will take up storage and they will take up a lot of storage and they are downloaded to the device. Now, even then, there are ways to manage this through offloading unused apps like you can on your iPhone, and we'll get to all that. But really, that's the biggest thing. The apps you download and install will take up, varying amounts of storage, and some of them more than others. And there may be some other situations where you'll want to store things, but really that's the biggest thing is the apps that you use. So if you don't intend to do anything but just stream TV and movies, even the storage is probably not a major concern. Now, having said that, the other side of the coin is that right now, and of course, you never know, this could change when Apple releases new products and so on. Technology is always changing, right? But as of this moment, there is only a $30 difference. A $20 difference. I apologize. $129 to $149 for the two models. So for 20 extra dollars, you get twice the storage, you get the optional Ethernet port, and you also get some additional wireless technologies, right? So things like Thread, and these will enhance the use of the Apple TV with smart home devices, make it sort of easier for these devices to communicate. It's not so much that it will bring additional features and functionality that you'll notice right away, but it's designed to make things faster and just interoperate a little bit more easily. And so that's only available in the Wi-Fi plus Ethernet model. So when you're considering that, weigh the options. But for 20 extra dollars, I kind of recommend for most people just get the Wi-Fi plus Ethernet model. They might tell me, no, I don't want to do that. I'd rather save the extra 20. And then that's up to them, of course. But what if you're asking my recommendation to me for 20 extra bucks, praise God, we're blessed. We can do that. We can, it's not an issue for us. We can spend the 20 extra dollars and know that we have lots and lots of storage to go around and plenty of the Wi-Fi features and all of this. But the basic $129 model definitely does have Wi-Fi. Does have the, oh my, what is it? A15 Bionic chip, maybe. I gotta tell you, I don't even remember. I'd have to look it up to be sure. But excuse me one second. All right, I apologize there. Anyway, I don't remember which chip that is exactly. I think it's A15 Bionic, but it's very, very powerful. And honestly, that's one of the things that makes the Apple TV unique. Part of what we're going to talk about over the next few sessions is, man, my TV itself has Netflix, it has Hulu, it has Amazon Prime, it has everything I want. It's a smart TV. Why do I need an Apple TV? Or why is it better than a Roku or an Amazon Fire Stick or something? And there are many answers to those questions. But one of the answers that I can tell you right now is that it's far more powerful. The Apple TV is probably the most. Now, I shouldn't go on record because I could be wrong for saying this, but I think it probably is the most powerful. It's certainly one of the most powerful consumer set-top boxes that you will find as far as the processor, the memory, these kinds of things. This device, I believe it is probably the most powerful, but definitely one of the most. And some people actually, say that it's almost comically powerful, that it's way more than you need in a set-top box. But the benefit of that is that the interface just screams. It's just so fast. It's so responsive, and you don't have lag. You don't have delays. It really, really feels good to operate. And the only one that I've found that comes even close to that is Xfinity's X1 set-top boxes in their X1 system. Those are not quite as powerful, definitely, but from what I can tell, but they are the only ones that even come close in performance. I've used some Android TV based stuff. I've over the years, different things, and I'm telling you, there's nothing that compares with the performance of an Apple TV. So that's an important distinction, right? So that's your Apple TV set-top box, okay? And you're also going to receive a remote, which is called in the United States the Siri remote. In other countries, if they have Siri, it's called Siri remote. If they don't, it's called Apple remote, but it's the Apple TV remote, okay? And we are going to describe its layout to you very shortly. And we're going to teach you how to use it. The other port that you will find on all Apple TVs, which we haven't talked about yet, regardless of the model, is the HDMI port. Now, this is the port that connects your Apple TV to the television. And so you need to have an available HDMI port on your TV. Now, most TVs, I don't know. I mean, we're talking probably anything this in the past 20 years or so, 15 anyway, will have HDMI. And so that's typically not a concern, but you will need to have one, an HDMI port, and you'll connect a cable, which you'll have to purchase separately because there are all different lengths of them and so on, and they range in price. I found one for a customer at Walmart a couple weeks or maybe a month or so ago now for roughly $10. Was not much at all. And it was a very, very good braided HDMI cable, really good cable. So those cables carry video and audio. So that's all you need. And you'll connect the HDMI cable to the HDMI port on the back of the television. And of course, the other end to the Apple TV. They're the same on both ends. You can choose the length, but they are sold separately. If you're buying your Apple TV online from, let's say, Apple, the Apple Store, or Walmart online, Target, Best Buy, keep in mind that you're going to need the HDMI cable. It is not included. So if you don't already have one that you intend to use, you'll want to purchase one. And I kind of recommend that anyway, especially if you have a 4K television, because there are HDMI cables that are optimized for 4K and for things like audio return channel, which is enhanced audio, and we'll talk about that. But basically, that's a good thing. So if you get a new HDMI cable, that's probably a benefit. So you will connect that to your television and to your Apple TV. And then, of course, you'll connect a power cable that's included. Everything there is included. So you'll plug that into the wall or your surge protector or whatever. And of course, the other end into your Apple TV. And it takes about 30 seconds or so roughly to boot up, and it's all ready to go. Maybe not quite that, but give or take, And then we need to use the remote to set it up. So now we have to learn the remote. But let's just talk a little bit more here about this connectivity. So again, 2 cables. That's really all you need. Okay. Some people will maybe use that Ethernet cable, but I don't think for most people. 2 cables, HDMI sold separately and power cord included, right? So we plug the HDMI cable into the skinny, long port on the back of the Apple TV. Sort of feels like a USB port at first glance, but if you pay real close attention, you can tell it's maybe a little bit wider. You plug the HDMI cable there into that, and the other end into one of the available HDMI ports on the back or side of your television, wherever it might be. The other one is your power into an electrical outlet or surge protector. And of course, then into the back of the Apple TV. And that powers it. There's no on-off button or on-off switch. It's just ready to go. So now, the only other thing to do on your television is to make sure that you set the input to the correct source. And many TVs now have screen readers, so you may be able to do this without sighted help if you're a screen reader user. But you might have a TV that doesn't have a screen reader, or you might not know how to do this. So it may require sighted family or friends to help you with this initial setup to get the TV onto the correct input. Now, the good news is most modern TVs, most being the operative word, right? There's some exceptions, but most modern TVs have the ability to automatically switch once the Apple TV is set up, so that if you also have, let's say, a cable box and you pick up that cable remote, it will automatically switch when you press a button on that remote to your cable input. And then when you pick up the Apple TV remote and press a button, it will automatically switch to your Apple TV input. This is the best case scenario, and it does work quite well on modern TVs. If it isn't working, you can check to see if there is a setting. You may want to Google this for your TV, because the name of that setting is going to vary depending on the brand, the manufacturer of the TV. The overall general name for it is CEC, like Charlie, Echo Charlie. But the thing about that is that's not the name that most TV manufacturers will use. Okay. They'll have another name that indicates automatic port switching, automatic source input switching, but it's really, typically it's enabled by default. Okay. So if you have a recent TV, it's probably not an issue. The other thing is that when you are looking, the first time when we set up the Apple TV, you are going to have to switch this manually. And, there's a button on your remote that may say source, or it may say input, or you may have to go into a menu depending on your TV. And you're going to see things like HDMI 1, HDMI 2, HDMI 3. You might see other options like AirPlay, Chromecast, Live TV, because it may have, its own tuner in it. And then you may even have on older TVs things like composite. If you have a built-in DVD player, you might see DVD or something. So you need to pick the HDMI source that corresponds to what the Apple TV is connected to. And this might be a little bit of trial and error. You might need to try one, and if it says no signal, then try another one. Okay. And again, this may require some sighted help just for the first time of getting things up and running here. Now, once we're on the correct port and we see that there's an Apple TV setup screen, we need to use the Apple remote. So we're going to teach you right now what that looks like and how it's laid out. I happen to have one right here, believe it or not. And the good news is it's very, very simple. It's probably the simplest remote I've ever used on any television-based device. In fact, not probably, I'll say it is. The modern Siri remote, Apple TV remote, is solid aluminum, feels very good in the hand, and the buttons, of course, go on top. There's no battery cover on the back because it's a built-in rechargeable battery. It's going to use Bluetooth to interact with your Apple TV. And occasionally it's going to use IR to control your television, or maybe a sound bar or something if it needs to. Typically, nowadays on most TVs, that's not even needed, but you might have some other devices, and we'll talk about that. All right. Now we're going to talk about the button layout here, and I'm going to start on the right-hand side of the remote because there is a single button on the side, and it sort of reminds you of what your maybe side button on the iPhone feels like, okay? And what that button does on the Apple remote is that will summon the personal assistant whose name I won't say because it will set off everybody's devices, but it's Siri. You know who I'm talking about, right? And to use that, once your Apple TV is set up, you'll press and hold the side button and talk to her and speak your request and then let the button go. So that's the side button on your new Apple Siri remote. Moving on to the top of the remote, you're going to feel a series of buttons followed by, at the very top, a round circle. And we'll explain all of that. But I want you to go up above the round circle and go to the right just a little bit. We're still on the top surface of the remote now, but we're at the top right corner. And there's a single round little button there. That is your power button. Now, I've stated to you already that the Apple TV does not have a power button, right? It's always either on or it goes into a sleep mode. But the power button is there to control your other connected devices and to wake and sleep the Apple TV. So again, best case scenario on modern televisions, if you press that power button, and you have to hold it for about a second or two, it will turn on your television. It will wake up your Apple TV. And if you have a connected sound bar, which is connected through your television, such as through an HDMI port on your TV or through an optical audio port on your TV, it may also turn that sound bar on. Now, notice I said the sound bar has to be connected through the television. That's because there are no ports on the back of the Apple TV for audio specifically. But if you connect a sound bar to your television, which most TVs have the optical audio, or a lot of sound bars now are actually using HDMI as well. So then that will work for all of your various set-top boxes and everything. The other way you can go to enhance the sound of your Apple TV is through the use of the HomePods. And we will talk about that later. All right. So you have two options there. But if you have something connected like that, the power button, when you press and hold it for 2 seconds or so, should also turn that on. Now, in the case of my family, we have a sound bar that kind of just goes into a sleep state. And so after we turn on the power, or before, we can do it either way, we kind of have to press the volume up button to sort of wake up the sound bar. You just press it one time. And if you're really, really listening, you can even hear a little click on the sound bar. But within about 3 to 5 seconds or so, it's ready to produce sound. So I typically do that first. I press the volume up one time, wait a couple seconds, and then I press and hold the power button. And that makes sure everything's ready. And then when it goes off, the sound bar goes to sleep after a while. So that is the top right corner, the power button. We've talked also about the right edge, the right side of the remote has the Siri button. Now, what we'll do is we'll point out that when you want to turn off your devices, you again press and hold that power button for a couple of seconds, and it will turn off everything that it can. It'll put the Apple TV to sleep, and if it can turn off the TV, it will do so as well. All right. Moving to the left of the power button is that round circle that I talked about. And what you're going to find is that is actually a combination click pad and trackpad. So what that means is that it can be clicked in 5 different places, like a directional pad, right? Up, down, right, and left. And in the middle, it can be clicked, which is kind of like your select or OK button. And that's in the middle of the circle. So you have 5 different places you can click that, and you can navigate that way by clicking any of the corners, any of the edges of it. If you need to move right, press the right side of it. If you need to move left, click the left side repeatedly, and so on. It also functions as a trackpad, meaning that you can swipe left, right, up, or down. And there are benefits to doing it both ways. The most obvious is if you're in a really long list, it's going to be far quicker to swipe a whole bunch and then get that final precision for the last couple of items you need to move to by clicking. But this is personal preference. Some people don't like the swiping because they say it moves too quickly. You can set the speed of it, but for some, it's still, especially if there may be some dexterity challenges there for people, it may just be better to disable that swiping. And you can do that in your Apple TV settings once it's set up. But the center of it is definitely clickable. You actually click. So when we want to open something, instead of tapping on it to open or doing a double tap with VoiceOver like we do on an iPhone or an iPad, we actually just click the center button. That's how you activate something, is to click. And that's the same whether you use VoiceOver or not. As you can see, because you're not touching the screen directly, we don't have to have a different set of gestures per se, because we use the click pad like everybody else does. So that's the click pad. We'll spend more time on it here in a little bit. Now, below that click pad are your buttons on the remote, and that's what we want to talk about next. On the left, in this series of buttons, we'll call it the top left, okay? It's slightly indented, and it is the back button. This back button is what will take you to the previous screen within any app, and if you keep pressing it repeatedly, it'll back you all the way out to the main home screen. You know that term home screen already if you're an iPhone user or iPad user. And so you can also quickly jump multiple levels back to the home screen by pressing and holding the back button for a couple seconds, just really a second or so. Now, this is also the button that you will triple click to turn VoiceOver on very soon, okay? So again, we call that the back button. It is the top left of the connected series of buttons, you know, that we have. There's one button at the very top right of the remote that we talked about. That's power button. And there's the side button, but I'm not counting those buttons now. I'm in this series of buttons that's all together below the click pad. And the top left button there, slightly indented, sort of concave feeling, is your back button. And that is the button you will triple click to turn on VoiceOver. Again, if you press it once, it takes you to the previous screen. If you press and hold it for a second, it takes you all the way back to the home screen. Once you're on the home screen, if you press it again, it brings on the screensaver. And to get out of the screensaver, you just press it one more time. This is the back button. All right, directly to the right of that, the top right button in this series, not on the whole remote, but in this series, is known as the TV button. This button can take you to the home screen or to the TV app, which we will learn about soon. And if it is pressed twice quickly, it will definitely take you back to the home screen. You can also press and hold this TV button for a second or two to open Control Center. And again, where have we heard that term before, right? So you're going to recognize some of this stuff, right? Control Center, press and hold the TV button for a second or so, and it brings up Control Center, and we'll learn all about Control Center later. All right, that's the top right button in this sort of connected series. Now we want to go back to the left. We have that back button. Let's go down to the next row. That is the play and pause button. Not much explanation needed there, because it does exactly what its name suggests. When you have media on the screen, it will play it, it will pause it. And if you have music playing in the background or something, it'll do the same thing. It'll pause or play, resume playback. There is a voiceover feature, but we'll talk about that. And there's a keyboard feature we'll talk about later that also uses that button, but that's the play pause button. Second row there on the left. I want to stay on the left side and go down one more to the bottom left button on the whole remote, and that's your mute button. That is designed to mute the audio. It seems as though, and I never even really noticed this because I don't use it typically, but I heard somebody say it and I tested it and saw what they meant, that it seems like when VoiceOver's on, it doesn't really mute. Maybe that's by design, so you can't mute VoiceOver, or maybe it's not. I don't know, but certainly there are other ways of controlling audio besides that. But that's your mute button on the bottom left. So for what that's worth, that is there. Now, on the right side, below your TV button, you have the long bar, which you would probably imagine, and you'd be right, is the volume button. The upper end is volume up, and the bottom half is volume down. So that's the bottom right button on the remote. So let's go over this one more time. Again, at the very, very top of the whole remote on the right corner is the power button. And on the right-hand side of the remote, that long button is the Siri button. To the left of your power button and come down a little bit is your click pad to navigate And remember, we can click and we can swipe in any of the 4 directions. Plus, we can click the middle of the click pad. Now, going down then on the left-hand side, we have that slightly concave button. That's the back button. And on the right is the TV button. Okay. The second row on the left is the play pause button. To the right of it is the volume up part of the volume button. And then the row at the very bottom on the left is the mute button. And the right side there is the lower half of the volume button, which is volume down. All right. That's your remote layout. The only other thing to point out about the remote is that on the very bottom edge of the remote is a connector, a port. It is a USB-C port, and it is designed for charging. You can connect this remote to a USB-C cable that happens to be plugged in through the power adapter. So if you have an iPad or an iPhone 15 or something that has, a USB-C cable, and you've already got a cable connected to, let's say, the 20-watt power adapter or one of the dual port adapters or something, you can just plug the remote into that. If not, you certainly can supply your own in other ways. And I think you have to actually get your own USB-C cable now. So to save, packaging and whatever, they don't include that. But you can get that. Now, some of the older previous generation Siri remotes, even the ones that look the same as this, did have Lightning. So you just have to be aware when you got your Apple TV, but the newest ones are USB-C. Okay. Now, that's the remote layout, and it's as simple as that. So when you first get your Apple TV, we've already connected it now, right? We talked about how to connect it to the television, how to power it, how to switch inputs on your TV to make sure you're ready to go. The first thing that's going to happen is that you're going to need to just bring the remote kind of, not really, it doesn't have to be too close to the Apple TV at this point because it's sort of already paired, but you have to make the final connection by just clicking the center button of that click pad one time. And that's going to make the connection for you. You won't hear anything, but if you're a voiceover user, as soon as you do that clicking, now you can turn on voiceover right from setup. And again, how do we do that? We press the top left button, that slightly concave button, the back button 3 times quickly. We click, 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 and then we will hear our television saying voiceover on, and it'll start reading, select your language and all of those things, right? So now we're in a typical setup screen, and we navigate through this setup screen with the up and down parts of the click pad, or maybe they're left and right in some cases, but I think typically for this setup, it's mostly up and down. Again, we can swipe or we can click. And of course, when we want to choose something, we press the center of the click pad. So we select United States, we select English, all of those kinds of things. We maybe agree to the terms. But one of the things that we're going to wonder about right away is, do I have to manually enter my Wi-Fi, my Apple ID, my password, all those things? And the answer is you certainly can do that, but you do not have to. There is another way, and it's actually a way I really like. It is automatic setup. And this is the very similar to what we see on iPhones and iPads, right? We hold another device up close to the Apple TV. Now, obviously, you're not going to hold another Apple TV up to this Apple TV. You're going to hold your iPhone or your iPad up to it. So what I encourage is when you're starting the setup on your Apple TV, you've clicked the center of the trackpad, click pad, and then you've done the triple click of the back button to turn on voiceover. I encourage you to already have your iPhone unlocked, awake. You've authenticated with Face ID or whatever. You're on the home screen. Just leave it on the home screen. And bring it close when you're prompted to, because the TV will tell you. It's going to say, bring your iPhone or, whatever it'll say up close to the Apple TV. So remember, we're bringing it up close to the Apple TV set-top box, not to the remote, not to the television itself, but to the Apple TV set-top box. You can even lay it on top if you want. And it will acknowledge it. The phone will say, do you want to set up this Apple TV? So on the phone, you're going to swipe over to set up, and it's going to copy. Now, make sure before you do this, that you're on the correct Wi-Fi network. So there's several caveats here. You want to make sure Bluetooth on your iPhone is enabled. Make sure you're on the Wi-Fi network you want to use, and make sure that you are signed in with your Apple ID and password, and that you have two-factor authentication enabled. As long as you do, everything should go very, very smoothly, and you hold the phone there, and it will copy the Wi-Fi settings. It will copy the password, Apple ID and password to your Apple TV, and everything is good to go. It'll take just a couple minutes, and it's very, very simple. And I've seen it work numerous times flawlessly. I did have a customer recently where it did not work, and I suspect that the reason had to do with their particular type of Wi-Fi. But we were able to manually connect them then, and everything was okay. But this certainly does save quite a few steps if you can do it. And you don't have to learn text entry on your remote quite as quickly. We're going to learn it, but this, saves you having to do that right out of the gate, because you can use your phone as the device that copies all the information. So those are the main parts of the setup: your, Wi-Fi, Apple ID, and password. And again, you don't have to enter them manually as long as you use the automatic setup. And once you're done, the phone's going to say you can hit done, or you can open the remote, because you can actually use your iPhone as a remote to control your Apple TV. I typically just hit done at this point, because I'm going to use the included remote. Now, if you want to use your iPhone as a remote, that's accessible, and you can do that. And by the way, you can even use your Apple Watch to control your Apple TV. But I kind of feel like we're not there yet. We'll get there soon, but that's not a day one thing, I don't think. So I always hit done, and then I move on. Now, once it's done, you can move the phone away, whatever you want to do. And I'm going to ask you to hold on just a moment. I'm going to be right back with you in about a minute. Just hang tight. Okay. So that's your basic setup. Now, there are a couple of other questions that the Apple TV setup is going to ask you, and you can simply use the remote to answer them accordingly. One has to do with enabling Siri and dictation. One has to do with whether you want to download aerial screensavers and how often. And they're cool. They have screensavers from under the sea and from outer space, and different city views and flyovers and all kinds of really cool stuff. And you can have them downloaded automatically to your Apple TV for screensavers, but you can also use your own photo library as screensavers. So there are a few different options that you have. And during the initial setup process, you're going to be asked about that. The other question that you're going to be asked, or the other thing you're going to be asked about during initial setup, is to select a TV provider. Now, we have not begun to talk about that yet. That is on, that's the very next thing we're going to talk about after the setup. Because remember, I said we're going to switch gears and talk about how you get content shortly. Well, that's coming. Okay. But you're going to be asked that question during setup, is if you have a TV provider. And if you do, you can select it from the list. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But let me just explain that if you have one on your iPhone or your iPad, it will actually, it will automatically use that same TV provider on the Apple TV. So if you have your iPhone, iPad signed in to a particular TV provider, then it uses iCloud. It knows that information on all your devices, and it also, during the automatic setup, transfers that to your Apple TV. Then it will prompt you to download the app for that TV provider. But if not, it's going to ask you to select a TV provider, okay? And it may ask you for a username and password to sign in as well. You can skip that step if you don't know it right now. I had a customer recently who didn't know for sure, because he had never done any online streaming with his TV provider. And so what we thought was the correct password or username was not. And we found it eventually. He got it, and now he's using it very happily. But For the initial setup, we skipped it and we came back to it later because we weren't sure. And so we did do it later. You can do that. I encourage you to do it right away if you know it. Okay. And again, we're going to talk about that momentarily. Now, when you're done with all this, you are on the home screen. And that is where we're going to start on Wednesday as far as the navigating part. We're going to skip that for now. We're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about content in a moment. We have a lot to cover on Wednesday as far as navigating with VoiceOver and without, which is mostly the same, but a few little things to be aware of. We have to talk about text entry. Text entry is so important. It's not something you're going to have to do every day, but boy, you need to know how to do it so you're not frustrated if and when you do need to do it. You can enter text directly on the remote. You can dictate text. You can use your iPhone to enter text, and that includes using Keychain for passwords. And you also can use a Bluetooth keyboard to enter text. So there are so many ways that you can enter text on your Apple TV. And we'll learn about that on Wednesday. We'll also talk about Siri. We'll talk about the TV app. We're going to learn all about the different apps on Wednesday and everything like that. What I want to do for the rest of the time today is I want to talk about content. I want to talk about how we get content, and I want to talk about the differences between streaming and using other ways to access television. Now, before we do that, I'm going to give everybody a 1 or 2 minute break. If you need to grab a snack, a drink, whatever, stretch your legs a little bit, and we'll talk here in a minute or two. We'll reconvene and we will talk about all this content stuff because we really need to cover that next. So we'll be right back. Don't go away. We'll talk to you in a moment. Once again, just giving you a little break here, coming back momentarily, ladies and gentlemen, and getting right back into things. Just a moment. All right. Well, hopefully you had a chance to do whatever it is that you wanted to do there during that quick little break. And we're going to move on now and we're going to talk about what we need to know about getting content and the different ways to do that. And before we even do that, I want to remind you that the Apple TV is a streaming device. So one of the first things we really do need to be sure of when we're going to use this device is that we have a reliable internet connection. When I set up Apple TVs in person for my customers, just as if I do any smart home or security system installation or anything for them, I always begin with an internet diagnostic check at their home. That is the very first thing that I do. And if I don't like what I see, I inform them about it, right? Now, theoretically, we have already planned that out before we get started, but not all people are comfortable with that. And so sometimes they leave it to me. And so if I don't like what I see, I tell them and I say, look, your internet speed is only 15 megabits per second. That's not great. I've seen worse, but it's not great. So you may experience slow performance. You may occasionally experience buffering. And if I do this, you need to be aware of that ahead of time because there's nothing I can do unless we change internet providers or, we look at these different possible causes and what have you, so they know going in what they're going to experience. And Similarly, we have to make sure we have good Wi-Fi in the room that we're using the Apple TV in. Okay. Now, the Apple TV is capable of using both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi networks for those who know about that. Um, but it's really important to make sure that the room the Apple TV is physically connected in is getting good Wi-Fi performance, right? And we've had customers who really do need to think about this. We live in an area. Praise God, we are a Comcast market. We have Xfinity here. I truly believe Xfinity is the best internet service in the country, and it's not an issue for people who have Comcast. We're usually fine, even if they have one of the slower Comcast packages. It's usually fine. Um, but we also have a couple other internet providers around here that people can use. Some locally owned fixed wireless stuff, and then we also have a phone company which is still using DSL in this area because they've not brought fiber here yet. They say they're going to, but if we have a customer that has that can be a problem because their copper DSL is very, very slow. So once in a while, I run into that. And the other thing I run into is maybe people don't have the Wi-Fi that they need throughout the home. Now, again, if you're an Xfinity customer, Comcast offers these what they call X-Fi pods, and they are designed to extend your Comcast Wi-Fi network, and that's good for most people. Our family uses one. You can have two in a household if you need to, but we only need one, and praise God, that does the job just fine. For most people, that will do the job just fine. Other people may have their own router, a Linksys VLOP or an Eero or Nest Wi-Fi or something, but some kind of mesh system or what have you. And you got to make these decisions. But again, we help you if we set it up for you. And it just may be that we need to extend the Wi-Fi a little bit, or we need to do this or that. But it's definitely something to be aware of, because if you want the best experience that you can possibly get, you're going to need good, reliable internet. All right, so now that we know the content comes from the internet, let's talk about the different ways that we can get content onto our Apple TV that we actually want to watch, right? We've set up this Apple TV, but where does the content come from? Now, the Apple TV, of course, being made by Apple, is connected to Apple's stores, meaning the iTunes store. So it is possible to browse and purchase TV shows from the iTunes store, and you can purchase and rent movies from the iTunes store. And they've got anything you can imagine pretty much. I mean, almost everything you can think of. There's some exceptions here and there, but they've got just about anything you want. Old movies, new movies, classics, any genre. And again, you can rent a movie. When you rent it, you get, I think, 30 days to start watching it. Once you start watching it, you can watch it for 48 hours, as many times as you want, on all of your Apple devices, not just the device you rented it on. So if you rent it on the living room Apple TV, but you also have an Apple TV in the bedroom, the kitchen, or even your iPhone or your iPad, you can watch that same movie on any of those devices. And the same thing goes with TV shows. You cannot rent TV shows, though. You can buy them. But when you buy a TV show, you can buy an individual episode. You can buy an entire season. You can buy what they call a box set, which is like all the seasons of the show. And then currently airing shows will have what they call a season pass. So you can watch any episodes that have been released so far. And when a new episode is released, you'll get a notification and you'll get an email saying, the episode is now ready to watch. And it's usually within just a few hours of when it has aired. And so that's a season pass. Now the prices range, pretty wide variety of prices on this kind of stuff, just depending on how new the movie is, or how, whatever. It's pretty much in line with what you'll find anywhere else. We have Comcast, Xfinity, X1 television here, which is cable TV really. And I've compared the two. Like I've gone into the X1 on demand, and looked at what it would cost to buy a season of a show or an episode or an entire movie, or to rent a movie or something. And it's typically just about identical to what I find on Apple, or vice versa. So it's very reasonable. A lot of times you can rent a movie for, you know, $3.99, $4.99, $5.99, and purchase it for, slightly more. Some of them are higher if they're still in theaters, whatever. But this is something you can do. So you want to rent something, you want to watch something truly on demand by renting it or buying it. You are connected to the Apple online Apple iTunes stores. Okay. So you can do that. And there's a lot of content to be gotten there. And if people give you, Apple gift cards for Christmas or whatever, you can use all that. And so this is definitely available on every Apple TV, at least here in the United States and many other countries, right at launch. You don't have to have any extra apps or any other sign-ins. You can watch what you rent and purchase, and you can make those purchases and rentals right on the Apple TV itself. So that's something anyone can do as soon as they set up the Apple TV. But as you can see, if you plan to use the Apple TV regularly, that's not going to be the only thing you're going to want to do, because you're not going to want to have to buy everything. Now, the good news is if you do buy something, it's yours. You don't have to store it. I said that earlier. You're not storing it locally, but you are streaming it. It's stored in iCloud. It's not taking up your personal iCloud storage either, though. Please understand that, okay? It does not take up your personal storage at all. It's just stored on their servers, and then, you are authorized to use it, okay? And you can pause, you can rewind, all of those things. And again, you can pause on one device and pick up on another right where you left off, as long as you're signed in with the same Apple ID. And yeah, it's a great system, and it is yours. You own it, and it's as simple as that. So there are benefits to that, and if you really like something, that's a good way to have it, right? But it's certainly not the only thing you're going to want to be doing if you're going to watch TV all the time on the Apple TV. So what are the other ways that you can get content? Well, let's talk about the ways that you can get content based on what you might already have before we go any further. I mentioned to you that my family and I are Xfinity customers. We do not actually qualify as cord cutters, and we're going to get into that in a moment. We're going to talk a little about, should I become a cord cutter? And I'm not going to go into detail because I could take an entire session to go into that, and I'm just not going to do that. We have a podcast coming up that I'm about to release that does go in depth about that a little bit more. But here's the bottom line. It's personal preference. There is no right or wrong. I cannot tell you what is going to work for you. Now, if you get a free consult with TTJ and you tell me your situation and you tell me what you want, then I probably can tell you what's going to be best for you. It's still going to be your choice, of course, but then I can at least give you a reasonable idea of what you will benefit from. But I want to dispel the myth about something that some people will, automatically, well, I want to become a cord cutter because excuse me, you might hear the puppy barking for a moment. She'll stop soon. She's just seeing something outside. But anyhow, there's this myth that some people say, well, I want to become a cord cutter because I want to save money. Okay, that's not a guarantee. Cord cutting doesn't automatically mean that you save money. Now, it's possible. It is definitely possible. And it's a bit easier to save money as a cord cutter because you don't have to rent set-top boxes, and because there's just more flexibility. For example, there are what are known as skinny bundles. These are services like Philo, which offers live TV channels like cable, except it leaves out sports, it leaves out your locals, and it leaves out most of the major news channels like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. And because it's leaving those out, especially because it's leaving out like ESPN and your local channels and stuff, they don't have to pay the high fees. And so they offer about 70 channels for $25 a month. And that includes unlimited DVR. So you can see right off the bat that that's way less than, what some other providers charge. But in fairness, you have to remember, if you want to watch the live, I don't know, if you want to watch 6 o'clock news and then Jeopardy at 7, and you want to watch the the Grammy Awards at 8 or something else that's coming on your live local affiliate, you're not going to be able to do that with Philo. If you want to watch the big game on ESPN or even on your local channel that has the big, you're not going to be able to do that. So there are things that are left out of Philo, and maybe that's okay for you. Maybe you don't need those things, right? But all I'm saying to you, I'm not trying to dissuade you from cord cutting. I used to be a cord cutter, okay? And Trainer Cliff still is, and that's great. And I have other customers who are. I have other customers who are not, okay? What I'm saying to you is there's no right or wrong, and cord cutting does not automatically equal money savings. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons that my family and I stopped cord cutting is because I found a package from Comcast that I just could not beat in price or in features and channel availability. And I said, this is just better for us. Praise God, money is not our number one priority. As I said, God has blessed us. He provides. We don't have to, think about it on those terms. But nevertheless, why would I spend extra when I don't need to, right? So it was definitely a part of it. Plus, I do like the Comcast experience. I like X1. I like Apple TV even more. But I use both. So it was just the right decision for our family. It may be the right decision for you. It may not. You may be better off to cut the cord completely, and you may even cut the internet cord. You may go with T-Mobile home internet or something. That doesn't work for my family. It doesn't work for Trainer Cliff's family because it's just not enough bandwidth for the number of devices that we use, right? We've got like 60 or 70 some Wi-Fi devices throughout our home, and it's just not practical. But for some people, maybe it is, and maybe you're right in a good 5G place, and you can get that home internet, and you're saving even more money, $50 or $60 a month for T-Mobile, right? So you have to look at the options. And again, if you want help with that, TTJ offers free consultations where we can guide you through all those questions. What do you want to watch? What do you like to watch? How do you want to get your internet? What's your address so we can check what's available? What are you paying right now? What would you like to pay? We have all these questions we ask you, and we can give you our recommendation. Again, it's still just a recommendation. You may disagree with it, and that's fine, but we can give you what, based on our experience and the resources that we have, we can help you make these decisions. But they are going to be different for everybody. So based upon that, that's all I'm going to say about cord cutting today, or not cord cutting, right? The rest of it's going to be ways that you can get your content, and that includes with or without cord cutting, okay? So let's talk about ways you can get your content, and I want to start out by talking about ways you can get content that you may already have. We already talked about buying and renting movies and shows from Apple, from iTunes. Now let's talk about if you have a cable or satellite provider. If you have a cable or satellite provider, that cable or satellite provider may have an app that works on the Apple TV. Apple TV is all based on apps, right? And you may find that there is an app for your cable provider or your satellite provider. I can tell you two of the biggest names in cable that have an app. Xfinity, Comcast. It's called Xfinity Stream. It's available on iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV. And Spectrum. Spectrum also, Charter Spectrum, has an app for the Apple TV. They both do, okay? When it comes to the satellite providers, DirecTV has an app for the Apple TV. And it works regardless of whether you have DirecTV satellite or DirecTV via internet, DirecTV Stream. It works on both now. Didn't always, but it does now. So even if you have a traditional satellite dish with DirecTV, you can still use the DirecTV Apple TV app. And the beauty of these apps like Xfinity Stream and DirecTV and all that is they give you the entire experience in that app, or at least very close to it. With Xfinity Stream, there are a couple limitations. One limitation is that you cannot rewind and pause on live TV, and that's because the pausing and rewinding on Xfinity is handled within the X1 box and that interface. And so since the Apple TV doesn't have that, it's not going to let you do that, but it will let you pause and rewind on DVR recordings and on demand recordings where that's permitted. So it does do that. And on purchases, it just won't on live TV. The other thing you can't do in the Xfinity Stream app is purchase and rent content like you can on the Xfinity X1 set-top box. If you've already purchased stuff, then yes, you can watch it. And you can go online on your iPad or something and purchase it and then watch it. But again, remember that with the Apple TV, they have their own mechanism for letting you purchase and rent movies and shows through Apple instead of through Xfinity. So you always have that option as well. But just full disclosure, those are two limitations of the Xfinity Stream app. But that's about it. Everything else is there. You can set recordings. You can browse the guide. You can schedule recordings. You can, watch recorded content. You can find all the free on-demand stuff and all your purchases. Watch any of these things you want. And as long as the Apple TV is on your home network, you can watch every single channel that you get through Xfinity. All the the live channels, all the fast channels, everything that Comcast offers in your package that you are subscribed to in the Xfinity app. And so it's the Xfinity Stream app, excuse me. And so it truly is the same experience. To my knowledge, it works the same way with Spectrum. If you're a Spectrum customer, it's the same concept. And with DirecTV, it's the same thing also. You got your library, you got your on-demand. I think they may let you pause. I know they do if you get it by internet. I don't know if you get it by satellite, whether or not you can pause live TV on the DirecTV app. But I mean, again, it's the full experience. It's everything there that you'll want, everything you could need for DirecTV. So those, when you have an app made by the actual cable or satellite provider, that's the best way to go because they have everything there. Now, what if you have a provider who does not offer an app for the Apple TV? Is there anything you can watch from your cable or satellite package if it doesn't have an app for the Apple TV? Like, let's say, for example, you have Verizon Fios TV or what's that other one? Breeze Line, used to be Atlantic Broadband, or Dish Network. Dish doesn't, they're a major provider, but they don't have their own Apple TV app. And the answer is that all is not lost because of a thing called TV Everywhere. Now, what TV Everywhere is it's the particular channel that you like, such as maybe Food Network or Nickelodeon or something, having these agreements with particular providers that say, hey, if your customer happens to get our channel in their package, we're going to let them watch it on a separate app. So you'll find that there's a Food Network Go app. There's an HGTV Go app. There's a Freeform app, Smithsonian Channel app, Lifetime app, all these different apps that are branded as the actual channel itself. Okay. And when you download that app to your Apple TV or your iPhone or iPad, what will happen is it'll say, oh, you can watch, this brand new episode free, but everything else is locked and you can unlock it now. When you unlock it now, it's going to say, okay, who's your TV provider? Because what we're going to do is we're going to use your TV provider credentials, your username and password for Dish Network, for example. And we're going to see if you pay for Lifetime or Food Network or HG, whatever, in your Dish Network package. And if you do, we're going to let you watch everything here in our own Lifetime app or Food Network Go app or whatever. And that's TV Everywhere. It uses your TV package through your provider to give you a separate app experience, right? Now, I've sort of noticed a trend recently that some places, some channels are kind of getting away from this because of the fact that companies like Comcast and DirecTV are offering their own apps, and that's really the better way to do it. But this is still an alternate if you don't have an app, okay? The best experience is if your provider does. But if they don't, you can still get a lot of content through TV Everywhere. And so you'll download the app. And what's nice, you remember me saying earlier that the Apple TV setup process is going to ask you who your TV provider is? Well, that's why it asks you that question, because if it can, it will determine which apps are in your package, or at least which apps are available. And this is through a feature called single sign-on. So single sign-on is something that not every TV provider offers, but some of them do. And what they'll do is they'll actually store your username and password on board instead of you having to enter it each time. So then when you download Food Network Go, it's going to say, oh, we see that you're signed in to Dish Network I'm paraphrasing, right, what it's actually going to say, but you get the idea. It's going to say, hey, we notice you're signed into Dish Network here on your Apple TV. Do you want to use that Dish Network subscription to access Food Network? And you just say allow, and then you don't have to enter that information manually. It will automatically authenticate. It'll say, yep, you got Food Network. And, within just a few seconds, you're watching Food Network live or any of the on-demand shows that it offers right in the Food Network Go app using your subscription through Dish Network. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, if you have a provider that does not support that single sign-in feature, you're going to have to choose manually who your provider is. And so, it'll say, okay, select your provider from the list. You pick that provider, and it'll then direct you to sign in. And how you sign in is going to vary. A lot of times it'll give you a website to go to on your phone. So you just pick up your iPhone and you'll go to, I don't know, like foodnetwork.com/activate or something, whatever it is, right? And it'll say, enter this code. So your Apple TV is displaying a code. You can read that with VoiceOver. We'll talk about that on Wednesday, how to do that stuff. But you read the code and you enter it on your phone on that website. And then the phone will say, all right, we're going to sign you in. And sometimes you select the provider on your phone and sometimes on the Apple TV. But so we're going to sign you in. What's your username and password? And then it communicates with the Apple TV and it automatically gets you activated. Other times now it's maybe a QR code, or there's other ways it can do it. But that's one of the more common workflows for it. So not hard, but definitely an extra step or two if it doesn't have single sign-in. So your TV provider may or may not support single sign-in, and that's when you need to know, your username and password and all that stuff, as we talked about. Again, this to me is not the preferable way to do it. If you have a provider like Xfinity that offers its own app with all of your channels in it, that is going to be the best experience because it's going to give you the live feed. It's also going to give you all the on-demand stuff. And it's just going to be a much smoother experience, right? But the TV Everywhere apps are a very nice and I think a very generous way of giving this to you if you have a provider that does not have their own app. And so it's definitely something to keep in mind. It's definitely worth signing in to your provider when you have the opportunity. And every once in a while, the TV Everywhere app might have a few exclusives. It's not really all that common, but every once in a while, maybe they'll have something on demand that your provider app doesn't, or that, maybe they give you this behind the scenes look or something that you can't find anywhere else. So there may be other benefits to having that, but it's hit or miss with that. But it's definitely another way you can watch TV if you don't have an app. Now, let's suppose we don't have or we don't want a cable or satellite provider anymore. And I'm not, again, encouraging or discouraging anything, but let's just suppose that's you. You say, well, I'd sure like some live TV, but I don't want cable. I don't want satellite. Well, there are apps and services that are live TV strictly by streaming. All right. A few examples. I already gave you one example earlier. It's Philo, Philo. They are a skinny bundle streaming service, meaning they don't have all the channels. You're not going to find the locals. You're not going to find the sports, and you're not going to find most of the news channels, right? No TBS, TNT. All right. But what they do have is they do have all of the like A&E networks, A&E, Lifetime, LMN. They have all of like the Warner Discovery, like Food Network, HGTV, Cooking Channel, Magnolia Network, Destination America, Discovery, Discovery Life, Discovery Family, all these kinds of channels. They have the Paramounts, so Paramount Network, Nickelodeon, Teen Nick, Nick 2, Nick Jr., BET, Her. They have Logo, they have Comedy Central, MTV, MTV2, all these different ones and more in that family. They have GAC, like the Great American Cut, whatever that is, the GAC Living, I think is GAC Family, whole bunch of those. They've got the Hallmarks, they've got the Game Show Network, and they have a lot of other channels that I'm not even thinking of. As I said, there's over 70 channels on Philo, and they do have unlimited DVR. It stores your recordings for up to a year, but It's unlimited. You just save what you want. You can watch it anytime. It's very accessible. It's a very, very good experience. And it's only $25 a month. And it lets you sign up through in-app purchase, which I'm a huge fan of. So you can download the app, sign up right through iTunes. It's billed through Apple, and it's very convenient. And I really do like Philo. I think it's a great experience on iPhone, on iPad, and on Apple TV. It also offers TV everywhere, by the way, for a lot of its channels too. So that's nice. Now, if you want something more, if you want a more traditional experience where you have, you know, 100 plus live TV channels, including all your locals and all your sports and everything, then you need to look for a slightly higher package, and it's going to be more expensive. My favorite one of those, if it's not done through Comcast or something, is going to be Hulu Plus Live TV. Now, this is going to give you, I think, between 80 and 90 channels in their base package, and then you can add their entertainment package, which offers even more channels. It also gives you unlimited DVR. It gives you your live locals. It gives you your sports. It gives you pretty much anything. There's a few channels missing that I personally wanted. So when my family and I used to do Hulu Plus Live, we also did Philo to fill in the gaps, because like Game Show Network and a couple of those were missing. But it is a very good package. And when you subscribe to Hulu Plus Live, you also automatically get Disney Plus and ESPN Plus. So it is the, in my opinion, best of its kind. Now, you're talking $80 a month plus, probably. I don't remember the base price. Maybe it's still $75 for the base price, but you're talking a whole different price bracket here, and you can see why this is going to get you closer to what are often thought of as typical, cable or satellite prices. But it's also a very good experience, and it gives you all the channels you want, and it's got some unique ways of blending the on demand and the live and the DVR, and so it's easy to start things from the beginning. And they've got just a tremendous on demand library. Of course, Hulu does anyway, and so it's a great experience. And I believe if you're not going to use traditional cable or satellite, that Philo and Hulu Plus Live TV are the top picks that I would recommend. There are some others. One of the most popular ones that people like to look at is Sling, and another one is YouTube TV. There's also Fubo. Each of these I don't recommend for various reasons, and I'm not going to get into those reasons right now, because I don't go out of my way to disparage anybody, right? If somebody's really, a company's really doing something that I take issue with, I'll tell you, but it's not my goal to disparage anybody. These are hardworking people who I know God loves, and they're doing what they believe is the right way to do things. And they are good, very well respected services, but each of them has something that I am not a fan of. And so YouTube TV, Sling TV, and Fubo TV did not make it into our TTJ list of highly recommended streaming services. Okay. They're available. They work. And they'll give you, if they have all the channels you want and you like the price, by all means, but they wouldn't be our first recommendations. Our first recommendations, if you're not doing cable or satellite, would be Philo and Hulu Plus Live TV. The other one you'll notice I did not include there is DirecTV, and DirecTV is one that we've highly recommended in the past. It is very good. It's very comprehensive. It sort of straddles the line between being a truly streaming provider and a more traditional provider. And in fact, they offer both. When you go to DirecTV, you can sign up for DirecTV via satellite or DirecTV via internet. And when you do that, you can use DirecTV Stream with your Apple TV. You can also get a set-top box, even if you're streaming. They have their own DirecTV Stream set-top box or what have you, powered by Android. This is a very expensive provider, but it's also very comprehensive with the number of channels that you get. And probably of all of the services, it's the most traditional feeling in the way that it's set up, in the way that the app works. But again, that's partially because it has both, the satellite and the standard and the streaming option. So those are, that's another one, DirecTV Stream, right? So they're all different options. You have so many choices to choose from. And this is just your basic live TV. This is if I want to watch so-called cable channels, right? And my live locals and stuff. Now, in addition to all of that, there are tons of what are known as streaming on demand, streaming video on demand, or SVOD services out there. And we know what they are. We're very familiar with these. These are things like Disney Plus and Hulu. These are things like Netflix, Max, formerly HBO Max. Now it's just called Max. Peacock. These are things like Amazon Prime. And then you have tons of other ones that range from free to to cost, right? You have things like Pluto TV and Tubi, and you have, of course, even YouTube really counts as that. And you have Crackle, and you have all of there are Freevee, Amazon Freevee, which if you don't want the full Amazon Prime experience, you can get Freevee, which is a completely free app and allows you to watch lots and lots of movies and shows. And you have Zumo Play, and there are just tons of free streaming services and paid ones. I've mentioned some of the more common ones. Again, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, Max, Peacock, Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus is another one. And a lot of these are really, really good if you're willing to pay for them. And the general rule of thumb is, obviously, as it might go without saying, the more you are willing to pay to subscribe to, the more content you'll get. You can get to the point where you can watch almost anything, anytime. They're on demand. Some of them also have live feeds, but they really shine as on demand services. You can watch whatever you want, whenever you want. And as I said, if you're willing to pay for them, and most of them are not bad prices at all, praise God, but if you're willing to pay for them, you get a lot for your money. I do want you to understand that. It really is true. You're getting a lot for your money. Take, for example, Disney Plus. If you subscribe to Disney Plus, you are going to get, basically, there are some exceptions because of licensing and contracts and stuff, but you're going to get basically everything Disney's ever made for the most part. And that includes not only, the animated stuff that we think about, like Beauty and the Beast and, Aladdin. It also includes all the Disney shorts and the Mickey Mouse and those kinds of things. But it includes way more than that, too. Like, for example, if you think about Disney having content like the Santa Claus movies, there are movies that, are sort of the more adult, not animated movies that are still under the Disney brand. Then in addition to that, you're getting content from Marvel, all the Marvel Studios stuff, the Spider-Man, all those things. You're getting Star Wars because they own Star Wars now. And you're even getting National Geographic because that's also the same company. So a lot of Nat Geo content is included in Disney Plus. And if you subscribe to the bundle with Disney Plus and Hulu, you get even more content because Hulu has just an incredible on-demand library, a lot of next day on-demand stuff from live broadcast channels, right? And a whole bunch of other stuff. They have just tons and tons of stuff, and they have sitcoms, and they have Hulu originals, and they have popular movies, and then they've really become very relevant. When Hulu first started out, I sort of felt like it was a lot of B-list stuff. Not anymore. They've become truly, truly just a lot of the stuff you'd want to watch. And there's even the bundle with Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus. So you're getting a lot of your sports content and everything that you want as well. This is huge. All right, that's just one example. Let's take another example. If you subscribe to Max, Max gives you everything HBO. It gives you most of the Cinemax stuff. It gives you a ton of stuff from Turner Classic, from TNT, from CNN, even news stuff. It gives you content from Warner Brothers. It gives you content from Discovery Network, so Food Network, HGTV, Cooking Channel, Magnolia. All of this is available on Max. So you can go from watching, a late breaking, recent hit movie to watching, a cooking show or a home design show. And not only that, they've got some great sitcoms on there that are very, very familiar. Some classics like The Nanny and Full House and Friends. There's just so much on Max. Again, trying to illustrate how much stuff. I'll give you two more examples. Peacock. Peacock has NBC Universal content, tons of great sitcoms like The King of Queens and Everybody Loves Raymond. They've got so many movies that you'd be familiar with, classic shows. Peacock is a wonderful service. And then finally, Paramount Plus. When you subscribe to that, you're getting CBS, you're getting Paramount, you're getting Nickelodeon, you're getting Smithsonian Channel, you're getting Comedy Central, all of this content and so much more available to you by subscribing. So if you are willing to subscribe to some of these services, the one thing I can tell you, some people, oh, another streaming service, I got to pay another monthly fee. But what you're getting for that monthly fee is pretty incredible. So you have to decide whether or not it's worth it. It's, personal preference. There's no right or wrong, but definitely it's worth considering. And then, as I said, there's tons of free streaming services as well that you can, download and start watching right away without having to pay anything. And there are other ways before we close here. We're almost finished for today, but I just want to point out, if you have a digital antenna, like an over-the-air antenna, you may be able to get content through that as well. Now, I'm not going to get into detail today about how, because there's slightly technical things we need to explain. So we'll get into that next week. But it is possible to watch content over the air. It's possible to watch home movies. There are so many ways of getting content on this Apple TV device. And what you need to do is decide what's going to work best for you. With a lot of these streaming services, there are no contracts, right? So you can try something, and if you don't like it, just go in and cancel it as well. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. We're going to go to questions here before we close.
My question is, with the DirecTV app, how accessible it is on the Apple TV, and also if it offers audio description. I know that the Dish Anywhere, which I had previously, was completely inaccessible, has been for years, despite many complaints to the people that do it. So that's my first question. Second one is similar with Peacock. I know on the iPhone, it is really hard to get audio description. It's very inaccessible. Even though it has AD, it's hard to get to it independently. So I'm wondering about Peacock's accessibility as well, and AD. Thanks.
Okay, absolutely. And great questions. And you're right that in general, we probably will kind of, ask you to wait till Wednesday on that. Okay. But I can answer some of those right now pretty quickly because they're pretty easy to answer because I've used both of them. Peacock is something that I use regularly, and I consider that app to be very accessible on the Apple TV. And there's a couple different ways to get audio description, which we will get into on Wednesday, both from the Apple TV settings and from the playback controls themselves. So that's a pretty accessible app, more so on the Apple TV than on the iPhone. I mean, I don't consider, like on the iPhone, I don't consider it inaccessible, but there are some challenges. There's some quirks, DirecTV, I have not used that app in probably over a year, but the last that I used it, it was also very accessible on the Apple TV and on the iPhone and iPad. With the iPhone and iPad, it's a little weird because you have to use Direct Touch. I'm not sure why DirecTV chose to do things that way, but nevertheless, that's how it is. But on the Apple TV, it's very accessible, or at least last I used it, it was. And they have, I'm trying to think about audio description on DirecTV. Audio description is something I personally don't use all that often, mostly because the kind of stuff that I watch, it's not typically necessary. And if in a rare case, it is, I've got sighted family that I can just say, hey, what just happened? But like, most of the stuff I watch is like, sitcoms or shows where the dialogue pretty much explains what's happening. That's certainly a personal preference, not telling you, how to, but for that reason, I don't have a lot of experience with the audio description, and I can't recall for sure, like how much of it DirecTV had. I do want to say that they had it, or, and I'm pretty sure I've heard other customers and so on say that, yes, they do use it pretty regularly on DirecTV. But I can tell you the app was fully accessible last time I used it.
Something about audio description using Xfinity on the phone. Is that a Wednesday question? I have the Xfinity app.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, some of that we might address Wednesday, but yeah, I mean, I can answer general questions about it. I mean, you should be able to get the audio description on the Apple TV for sure. Yes.
On the Apple TV, but
And,
not on
and on the phone. Yeah. It should work on all of the devices, really.
Xfinity. Actually, I have this X1 remote.
Right.
How do I, um, is that X1 remote supposed to have some voice? Mine has no voice. It has no audio, nothing. I can ask it for a particular channel or program, but it doesn't say anything. Turning, am I missing something?
Well, the remote itself is not going to talk. It does have the microphone and it will, like you said, you can ask it questions, but the talking will come from the voice guidance that you'll hear on the TV itself, not through the remote. But do you have the screen reader turned on your X1 box?
I don't know.
Because the voice, like if you're using Xfinity and you're actually using the set-top box, it will
Yes.
read everything. Like it'll tell you when you press the menu button, it'll read the choices and it'll read what's playing. If that's not happening, just hold down which button your microphone button is on the remote, right?
Which remote are we talking about?
The Xfinity remote.
Okay, I'll find it.
Okay. So if you hold that down and say voice guidance or turn on voice guidance or something like that, it will turn it on for you.
Okay, which is the same button I use to request
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I got that.
If the app for Optimum, if I have it on the phone, can I expect it to work pretty much the same on the TV through the Apple TV device?
In theory, yes. Now, the thing to make sure of is that they have the app available for Apple TV, because it's not automatically a guarantee that it is just because of the iPhone. Like, for example, the ones I mentioned today that very clearly don't, like Dish Network, you can find the app for the Apple TV and I apologize. You can find the Dish Network app for the phone and the iPad, but there is no Apple TV app. So there's no, option for that. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that there is an Optimum app. Now, of course, you could call them or chat with them. The other way you can find that out, though, is if you go to the App Store on your phone, and you search for the Optimum app, which you already have, it sounds like. But like if I go to I'll just let you hear this. If I go to my iPhone, I'm on my iPhone here. I've got my App Store open. And if I just search Xfinity and I pull up the Xfinity Stream app, which
Xfinity open 4 in the artwork number Xfinity Stream live TV on demand.
Okay. Once I open that and I start swiping right past all these images, it's going to tell me past all the artwork.
6 iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV apps. But
see, it actually said iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV app. So then I know that there is one for the Apple TV. So let's just try that is the name of it just Optimum, or what do they call the app on the iPhone?
I haven't opened it in a little. I think it's Optimum.
That should give it to us. Let's just Optimum.
Inserted Optimum. Artwork. 4 and 3 advertised. Get art. My Optimum utilities. Get 4 in the artwork. Optimum TV entertainment button.
That should be the one, I would think.
Search artwork 6 iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV apps.
Yep, so they do have an Apple TV app.
All your shows in one place. Stream live TV or catch up on your cloud DVR recordings from anywhere within your home.
Okay, so yes, it looks as though they're going to have everything, and my assumption would be that it's going to work similarly. Now, I mean, your initial question there was, can I expect that it'll work, much like it does? In general, yes. I mean, what we're going to learn about this Wednesday will sort of take care of any differences that there might be, because the layout can be different, but it's not going to be anything complicated. And, is it going to be accessible? Most often, that's not a problem for apps like this on the Apple TV. You never know, because it's like anything else. If the developer doesn't know about voiceover, you can run into an app that's just button, 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 but that's not with apps like this. You don't usually see that kind of problem. And what I suspect is that Optimum is probably using something that's based off of the same technology that Comcast and Spectrum are using. So I would think that the app is going to be accessible. And if it's accessible on the iPhone, that's a good start too.
And is there any way of stopping it from talking? Like when it says, so you just want it shut up. Is there any way you can do it without the touch control other than, it used to be you put your finger on the iPhone, put your two fingers on it, it'll stop yakking. But
right.
Yeah.
And if you're not using the touch control, right, you could try that, but I doubt it. I think probably it's gonna just have to finish talking, unless you can, now sometimes, like certain apps that you're in, again, if you would click up on the upper part, it may hide the on-screen controls, and then there won't be anything for it to read. It'll actually hide the playback controls or something. But yeah, that's one thing that, and one of the settings that I personally like to disable is audio ducking, because if VoiceOver is talking, I don't want the audio of the movie or whatever to be reduced. I want to actually hear the movie.
Right.
So, and that's something you certainly can do that may help a little bit. But that, we will cover that on Wednesday. You have to actually do that by putting audio ducking in the rotor, I believe, first, and then you can turn it off, and you can remove it again if you don't want it. I think that's still how you have to do it. I might be wrong on that. It's been a little bit since I've even looked at those settings, but you definitely could do that, which at least will keep the the sound in the foreground for you. And yeah, other than that, turning VoiceOver off, if it just is really being verbose and it's doing a lot of reading to you, just triple clicking the back button will turn VoiceOver off until you need it again. You can turn it back on.
Oh, okay. One last question for now. And the what did you say was the one that you get to the control panel?
Oh,
the TV button.
Yes, the top right. I say top right. That confuses people because there's that power button way up in the very top.
Right.
But that's not what I mean. I mean in the in the series of buttons, the one on the right at the top above the volume button. Yeah, you press and hold that for about a second or two, and it opens Control Center.
And we too have Xfinity, which has the remote, as you know, that with the voice guidance, and it has done a really good job. I'm wondering at this point, can you tell me what the benefit of the Apple TV would be over just continuing to use that remote? I'm sure there's benefits, and I just am curious what those would be.
I think that's a great question, and to give you a little backstory here, when we decided that we were going to go back to part of the thing is that I have really liked the Apple TV over the years. As I said, I think the interface is just incredible, and as an Apple user, who has other Apple devices, it just made sense. And so when we first got our Apple TVs, Comcast did not have the Xfinity Stream app for Apple TV. It was not available. And you probably remember that because it's not been all that long ago. And all these other services did have it. DirecTV had it, and then you could get Philo and Hulu and all this. And so I said, at that time, we were with Comcast, and I said, as good as Comcast is, I'm going to leave them for television. I'm going to keep their internet, but I'm going to leave them for TV because they don't have an Apple TV app. And so I have, in our home, we have multiple rooms with multiple, or with TVs. So we had, I don't know, maybe at that time, like 5 TVs throughout the house. And you know how that adds up if you're paying for set-top boxes for every TV. I said, I don't want to do that anymore. So we're going to leave their TV. But I kind of said then, to my family and to myself and everything, I said, if they come out with an Apple TV app, I will reevaluate this. And that's exactly what happened. They came out with the Apple TV app in like April or May. And by September of that year, I was a Comcast customer again, full blown, and so in our living room, we have the Comcast X1 set-top box, but we also have an Apple TV. In other rooms, it's mostly just Apple TVs, except for one other room. So we have, Apple TVs throughout the house. So which do we use and when, and what's the advantage to one over the other? I kind of use both. In the main room, because our package requires at least one set-top box. The way Comcast does it, if you don't have at least one set-top box, you are not getting their premium DVR service. You'll get a basic cloud DVR, but it's only like 20 hours or something. So for that extra fee, you're getting a lot with the, for us, it put us into a whole different package. So we got better promotions. Plus we get the extra, the really high-end DVR. So how often do we use the set-top box? It just varies. And because I like both, I switch back and forth. Like I'll just decide, okay, today I'm going to use Xfinity. And then another day I'll say, today I'm going to use Apple. My kids, when they're choosing, they, for whatever reason, just prefer Apple. One versus the other, using the Xfinity set-top box itself is really, really good with live TV because you can pause and rewind live TV, which you cannot on the Apple TV, for live, that is. Using the Apple TV is really good for anything on demand, even if it's using the Xfinity Stream app, because there are features of the Apple TV that allow the Xfinity Stream app to share its content so that you can easily keep track of what you're watching in the Apple TV app. It just makes everything available kind of in one place for you. It provides a universal search. And so it is really nice to use with Apple and the Xfinity Stream app. It would be very hard for me to give you an actual quantitative list of advantages of one over the other. I think, you mentioned that you kind of have been struggling with that decision for quite some time. I suppose if it's really important to you to make a definitive decision, the thing to do is to decide what you're using to base that decision on. And, if it's the theory that, and I'm not saying that this is you, I'm kind of just speaking to the masses here, right? But if it's the theory that I'm missing out on something because I'm not a cord cutter, we know that's not true. It's going to be very, very hard to beat the features and the content that Comcast gives you. And certainly if you want other streaming services, you can add those, right? You can be a Comcast customer and still subscribe to Hulu or Disney Plus or Max. And actually you get Peacock as a Comcast customer anyway. So you have
Right.
Peacock you can install, if it's the theory that, well, I'm spending too much money and I want to save money, that's a bit trickier. Like I said, for us, that is not the case, because for us to get everything we want to watch, we'd have to actually end up spending more by not having Comcast. And the other, benefit is we have Xfinity Mobile too. And that really saves a ton. So, I think if it's still a question mark in your mind, then either if we do it, I'm going to really try to do it, as I told the other gentleman, together next week, and we can all sort of do it together. And if not, you can book a private free session with me and we can go through it. But, we could figure out, if you're somebody who isn't watching a lot of the channels, right? Like, we don't watch sports here. We really don't. The Super Bowl, but you can stream the Super Bowl. That's, not an issue. We rarely watch live TV. Sometimes I like to, but honestly, when we sit down in the evenings, like the kids will say, let's watch Full House, or let's watch, this or that. And it's all stuff that we can stream, So if I were willing to not have all the channels, I could save money by just going with like Philo or just the streaming services and not a live service, But I'm like where Viola is when she made the comment earlier that, it just works so well that I really don't want to give it up. And for all the extra channels versus what I would save, but that's something to look at. If you think that you're trying to reduce cost, there may be a way to do that by removing the Comcast TV and just doing Apple. There's a lot of options, and I think for an Xfinity customer, it's actually one of the Xfinity customers are probably the hardest to answer that for, because the Xfinity package is so good and you're getting so much for the money, even though the cost goes up and it's high compared to what it used to be. There's no question about it. But they are a really, really good company with solid technology. A lot of other cable companies don't offer those same benefits. And so it's very easy to say, you can do a lot better with streaming. With us, it's not so clear cut, but certainly if that's something you want to take a look at, if we can do the session together next week or else individually, I'd be happy to go through that with you. But there are times I think you'll enjoy using the Apple TV more, and there are times I think you'll enjoy the X1 box more. And again, I've kind of just, when I first signed back up and I started using both, and I thought, I've got to come to a decision about this. I got to decide which one. And I really just kind of finally said, praise God, why? I don't really need to. I can flip back and forth whenever I want to. So I hope that helps you a little bit. It probably didn't.
No, it did. So the remotes are basically provide the same, navigating them is basically provides the same information.
Yes. We want to thank you all for joining us and say God bless you and have a great day.
We'd like to thank you again for joining. Didn't get your question answered? Need additional training? Send us an email at support@ttjtech.biz or support@stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with the U. That's STURITUP.com. I'm Trainer Cliff. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time. God bless.